Thank you everyone for being here with us on this Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon to talk about polarity and desire. And this is a topic that we have actually not talked about publicly in a workshop before. So I'm really excited to bring this topic to you. It's something that kind of underpins a lot of the work that we do because it's about energy, right? It's about how we show up. It's about who we are in life and, of course, also in the bedroom. And so, while we have not talked about this publicly, this is something that we teach often in workshops. It's something that I offer as part of my Tantra mini sessions. I'll drop a link in to that in a moment. And this is something that these free workshops are a chance for us to get to know you and for you to get to know us, join our community, start having these conversations. And this is something that if it sparks something in you, like please reach out for additional support. Please reach out about workshops or sessions because when we start to have conversations about polarity or about last month we talked about multiple orgasms, the month, we've talked about sexless partnerships, we've talked about all sorts of different stuff in our workshops. And these are meant to introduce the topic. They're not necessarily the therapeutic, emotional coach response that you might need for your particular situation. So, all that being said, I love to have you here, but know that this is not a substitute for therapy or coaching. So, please take care of yourself today. We are recording, but the recording will only show me and Christopher. So you're welcome to be video on, but you will remain anonymous. If you would like to send us a note in the chat, please do. If you send a note in the chat, of course, everyone could see your name. If you want it to be anonymous, you can send a note to Christopher directly through the chat, and he can read it into the group. And if you want it to be anonymous, just make a note, say like, please read anonymously. We have access to the chat, but I don't publish the chat anywhere. So again, your name remains anonymous. All right. So, darling, anything you want to add before we jump into intros and housekeeping and all of that?
No, mine is all on topic, so I'll wait until you delve into polarity to add my 2 to 5 cents.
Awesome. So, again, welcome everyone. I saw a bunch of different places on the planet. Thank you so much for being here. I'm your hostess, Andrea Devon Bertoli, pleasure coach and sex educator. These workshops have historically been called mindful sex, and we are going to transition them to being love in adulthood. This is how Christopher and I, as we build our practice together and as we do our work individually with our clients, really focusing on midlife intimacies, perimenopausal pleasures, and connections that happen when we really grow up. We have some baggage, we have some practice, we have some hard stuff to work through, whether that's illness or previous partners or shared children or whatever that might be. Our work focused on love and adulthood is here to address that. And so, polarity, as it fits into this broader topic of love and adulthood, you'll see as we go through the workshop today, gives us a chance to reimagine our relationship with power. And I'll put a big asterisk on that because we'll talk all about that. It allows us to reimagine our sexual and intimate and interpersonal dynamics with our other person or other people, and may change how you understand yourself sexually. And again, part of love and adulthood is really understanding that we are multifaceted, multidimensional beings, especially when it comes to our sexuality. And so we are here to help you unwind some old stories, give you some new information, and help you find your path to deep erotic expression, deep connection, and love in adulthood. So, as I mentioned, this is an introduction to the topic of polarity. And each of these topics is going to have, multiple threads we can pull on. The wisdom of this body of work, this wisdom of conscious sexuality, tantra, sacred sexuality, and even love in adulthood is unendingly deep. I plan to spend the rest of my life exploring it in my body, in my marriage, and in the classroom. So let's see. Last thing I want to note, as far as housekeeping, is I have your emails. Thank you very much. You will get a collection of emails from me featuring the replay, some additional resources, and different ways to connect with us if you're interested. You can unsubscribe at any time. Consent is very important in all my relationships, but I really hope you stick around because we offer these workshops. We do in-person workshops. We're teaching in Berkeley next weekend, actually. And the newsletter is the best way to stay connected, off of social media censorship, away from algorithms that push sex education to the back burner. The newsletter is the most direct way to stay connected. So I really hope you all stay with us. So again, I'm Andrea Devin Bertoli, and my coaching and my work really focuses on blending the spiritual and the scientific to help you experience pleasure, eroticism, connection, intimacy in love in adulthood. So I work a lot with perimenopausal women. I'm very much in the throes of it myself. Christopher is also an expert in perimenopause, thank God. And I'm here to help support you in your changing body and your changing sense of self. And I approach this work, I say we approach this work really as a healing practice. Therapy is great, meditation is great, yoga is great. All the other healing modalities are awesome. Most of the other healing modalities leave sex out of the conversation. And Christopher can speak more to that as well, as far as how it's separated out from therapy and why sex therapy is so important and why sex coaching is so important. And this is a way to touch into that. So that was a lot of me talking. Now I'm going to give it over to my babe.
Hi, y'all. Okay, I'm Christopher Brown. I'm a certified sex therapist. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been in practice working with folks in relationships and individually for over 20 years now. I'm very proud to admin for Andrea in this. And as we did these, as she did these for her individual coaching practice, I kind of became more and more of an active participant. And so we're taking that to the next level, and we have a group practice under the brand Sapient. And Sapient offers through Andrea coaching services and through me therapy services. So typically therapy services, if you think about any kind of therapy, I've usually got an injury or I've got something going wrong in my body and I need therapy to get back to baseline functioning. When we're talking about sex, who on the chat this morning is really hoping for, what I'd love is just some baseline sexual functioning. Now, if you've got pain with sex, which is often a perimenopausal and menopausal symptom, getting back to baseline functioning where you don't have pain with sex, that's a win. I'm not trying to, say that getting baseline functioning is bad. My whole career is based on getting people in life up to their baseline functioning. But in sex, oftentimes, and if you're here, you want to go from baseline to ecstasy. Okay, that's where Andrea lives, right? She can take you higher. Therapy is designed to get you back to baseline, and both are very important. And Andrea is right. So I was a practicing psychotherapist for a long time, and I'll give you a specific example that's more current of this very phenomenon that I saw. So my example's old. I'll give you a more current one in a second. So the Gottmans who taught me all my relationship stuff basically believed when I trained with them that if couples were having sex problems, first of all, couples, asterisks, right? So that was a problem, right? They didn't think about polyam folks. They didn't think about, broader relationship structures, right? But if couples were having sex problems, that sex problem was a relational problem. If you fix the relational problem, then the sex followed, right? Okay, I treated people for 10, 15 years with that rubric, and it worked about half the time. So then, after it didn't work for this one couple who didn't like each other very much, didn't have sex, came into my practice, that way and left very good friends who never had sex, I said, "Oh God, what am I missing?" And it turns out in this puritanical culture, psychotherapy is no different than life. Puritanical culture wants to separate sex from everything. So I had to go back to school just to get the information I needed to become a certified sex therapist, and along the way help this couple who had a very good sex life after we were able to apply basic sex therapy skills. So the more current example is Mary Claire. And if y'all don't follow her, you should. She is probably the leading media figure for perimenopause and menopause care. She's got a new book out for perimenopause, and she just posted something on Instagram yesterday saying, "Hey, women in midlife, if you're having major depressive episodes, right? I'm a diagnostician and I was trained initially to treat mental health issues. Frontline treatment now for women in perimenopause is not SSRI, it's hormone replacement therapy. Okay, so again, when we bring sex into the picture, all of a sudden, not just do our sex lives get better, but our entire lives get better. And that's what Sapient and Andrea and I are all about. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. With that, I'll hand it back to my wife, Andrea.
Amazing. Thank you. And apologies to those folks. I made the mistake. Usually I make Christopher co-host first thing, and I neglected to do so. So many of you are stuck in the waiting room. I do apologize. You're all here now, so thank you very much. You mostly just missed me jabbering as part of my intro, and it will all be recorded. So you'll get that later. Um, I dropped a few links into the chat. So Christopher and I have both been kind of pivoting a lot of our work to Substack. So we're both on Substack now. I write tend to be more verbose, and he's being very succinct and writing beautiful short posts, the little digestible bits. Also on socials, and you can um, yeah, okay, sorry. We're doing our next Love in Adulthood monthly event will be I dropped that into the chat. We're going to talk about reckoning and repair. So this is an important part of the work that Christopher especially does, which is how do we come to terms with what's up and really talk about it, and how do we repair from the big things, infidelity, betrayal, etc., and the small things. So that'll be next month. For the in-person event, yes, we are actually sold out. I apologize, I shouldn't have dropped that in. Luckily, we had a great response to our tantric date night here in Berkeley, and we will be having another one. But right now, we are sold out for that one. Okay, so let's jump into polarity. So as I
Hey, Andrea,
mentioned,
on that, do we want to
yes,
do a wait list for that or is that too complicated?
um, please just reach out to me.
Or me, and I'll put my email
Yeah.
here. So if you're interested in Tantric Date Night this weekend, if we have any cancellations, which we inevitably do, just shoot me an email, give me your information, and I'll figure out a way to manage the wait list. So great that we have that problem, and sorry we don't have a space open as of yet, but we may have some cancellations during the week.
Yep, totally. All right. Thank you. So again, polarity, for anyone who may have missed this intro, is this is not something that we have talked about a lot, but it really infuses a lot of our work because what it focuses on is both the energetics of sex and kind of how we show up in the world, but it also is helping us understand who we are, what we want in real life and in fantasy, which we'll talk about a lot. When we talk about love in adulthood, we really talk about desire, libido, connection, sexual play, and how these all interconnect in such a dynamic way. And if you've been in a long-term partnership or if you've previously been in long-term partnerships, you may have noticed that that stuff ebbs and flows. Your desire ebbs and flows, your needs and your wants ebb and flow, your libido may ebb and flow. And polarity is just kind of one layer of things we can play with, right? We taught a workshop a few months ago called the erotic toolkit, which is to say all the different things that you can practice, do, learn about, bring into the bedroom, and the toys that you can play with. Polarity is one of the things that may fit into your erotic toolkit. And first, because I always want to bring in the foundational lineage wisdom of this, oftentimes polarity, when we think about it in a tantric context, is it's often described as like masculine and feminine. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more, but that comes from some of the tantric lineage, which talks about the union of Shiva and Shakti, which is Shiva is the pure, unmoving consciousness, and Shiva or Shakti is the energy that brings life to all of it. And these are often, these deities and these energies are often shown as kind of a masculine bodied creature and a feminine bodied creature. And so we've extrapolated that to mean that the masculine is always leading, dominating, you know, guiding, holding, things like that. Whereas Shakti is more soft and feminine. But if you've done yoga, if you've done any of this kind of embodiment work, you also know that Shakti energy is powerful, it's forceful, it's dynamic. So we're not going to use those languages because they have connotations for a lot of us, whether that's religious connotation, whether that's gendered connotations, right? So we need both Shiva and Shakti energy to exist. It is literally the life force of the entire universe. But when it's collapsed into man and woman or masculine and feminine, it's, I don't know, it reads a little bit like trad wifey, like women should stay home and be soft and receiving, and men should be leading and dominating. And that might work for some people, for sure. But that's not how we're going to talk about polarity today. Because really, in the non dual tantric understanding, we actually are all goddess consciousness. All of us, the dynamic parts, the soft parts, the leading parts, the following parts, all of this is part of goddess consciousness, and we get to play in this realm of duality. Christopher, did you want to
Andrew,
add something?
yes. Are you
Perhaps?
okay? Are you willing to play a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. What is your master's degree in?
I have a master's degree in political science and what was called women's studies and was now called gender studies.
Okay. So when you think of things as masculine and feminine in this context, how does it make you feel at a visceral level intellectually?
Um, it feels very limiting in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. When we were talking about this a little earlier, and I said, I think we ought to give people permission because that's what, power is all about, is not, inviting them in, or it's about giving permission. How did that make you feel?
that feels great.
Okay. How did it make you feel did it make you feel, and go deeper.
Um, I I don't know.
You got a look on your face, y'all. She got a look on her face and she looked at me. And she all of a sudden wanted it wasn't in her head and she went, wow, that's kind of hot. Okay. So, and she doesn't remember right now because she's in her head and she's telling you about, hey, here's the gendered construct and the problem with masculine and feminine language. And she's right. She's right. She's right. Okay. And what I'm here to tell you is that polarity, while it is a force in relationship, that therapists who are trained by the Gottmans don't get trained in either, right? So we can bring energetics to our relationship, but what we're going to talk about today is bringing polarity and energetics into your sexual relationships. And all of a sudden, when we get out of our heads and into our bodies, sometimes our bodies respond very well to things that our heads are a little bit against, or maybe a lot against. Okay. So when we talk about polarity in this way, one, it's a dynamic in relationship that ought to be known and respected, and skills should be applied. But when we're talking about them in sex, one of the things we may have to realize is that our fantasies are not what we would call in my Gen X generation politically correct, or what we would have called in an apolitical world about 10 years ago, at least as far as this term goes, what we might have called woke, right? So polarity is one of these topics that is loaded because our heads, for a lot of us, especially those who are trained as a social worker or a gender studies person, will say, mm-mm-mm. Dan Savage will often say, hey, y'all, don't worry, your gender studies professor isn't going to jump out of the closet and scold you for what you want in bed. So we may be talking about one of those topics today for y'all, where it is an important fantasy, but you may have your own ambivalence about it. And that's what I'm trying to flesh out with Andrea because she's got it, right? And she's not alone. I've got it too.
Yes.
Real ambivalence about what I want and then stepping into it. Esther Perel will often say, we want in the sheets what we will protest in the streets. Thank you.
Thank you for effectively flustering me.
Well, I mean, but it happened, right? I mean, and that split that we're just seeing, right? Because y'all, when you weren't on camera, we were talking about this. You went, huh? And I'm like, why did we stop talking? And she said, because I'm having some feelings. But again, in her mastery, that's not available. And it's going to be the same for y'all. It's going to be the same for y'all. So again, we'll get in more and more into this, but as you play with this, do not expect yourself to be able to give or receive this play without some practice. and maybe some ambivalence from yourself first and then your partner's second.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure.
So one of the things again that comes up a lot, I'm in a lot of like sex witch circles and sacred sexuality circles, and I see a lot of people online talking about feminine embodiment and masculine presence. And like again, if that works for you, awesome. For a lot of us, it may not work. As a switchy bisexual, like that language falls short in a lot of ways. I happen to be in a heterosexual marriage, and so there's aspects of that that fit for me. And for you, if you're in a queer partnership or if you identify as gender fluid or somewhere on the gender spectrum that doesn't fit neatly into the masculine feminine boxes, like awesome. You get to define this and play with this in your own way. So as we think about alternative, more inclusive language, the terms that I love the most is directive and receptive, right? There's no gendered connotation. There's no kind of spiritual connotations. It's just like, who is kind of leading this conversation, this scene, this sexual experience, and who is receiving it, right? Directive, receptive. Some of the other language we'll use throughout the workshop today are top and bottom. And this comes to us from the BDSM world, which we'll talk about in a moment. Dominant and submissive is another way where you can play with polarity. And within dominant and submissive, there's a whole bunch of different power dynamics. Some are psychological, some are physical, right? We could do master slave, baby daddy, mommy pet, things like that. So there's all sorts of ways to play with that. The other really beautiful way to play with polarity is languaging that we have learned from a practice called the Wheel of Consent by Dr. Betty Martin, which is to say, who is doing the doing, right? Are we serving and receiving, or are we taking and allowing? And that language itself, it was so powerfully transformative for my own sex life. And I think, Christopher, I can speak, it was pretty transformative for you as well.
Absolutely.
And it's very much woven into this. So a full explanation and practice of the Wheel of Consent is beyond this particular workshop. But if you're interested in that kind of like, who's doing the doing and who is this touch for, it's definitely worth looking into. So we're going to use some of this terminology today, some of it coming from BDSM culture, some of it coming from these different perspectives. And again, we want you to find your own way of playing with it, right? You can borrow some of it. You can try stuff on, and it's worth exploring as a way to play, right? Sex is how we play as adults, unless we have, surf or mountain biking or, jumping off of buildings or whatever your form of adult play is. Like sex for a lot of us is one of the only ways we play. And so trying stuff on, exploring new ways of being, exploring new roles can be really powerful. And also, please know that sexuality generally, and kinky in particular, is on a spectrum, right? Like Christopher and I are often, the kind of most out there, like kinkiest people in a lot of places we go. And then we go to some other parties and we're like, we are so vanilla. Like we're not kinky at all, right? So all that to say, like, we are who we are, and that's
Are we even
awesome.
trying?
And it's on a spectrum, right? Okay. So, and for those of us that identify as switches, which is to say, we can embody and really deeply enjoy directive and receptive. We can explore and be with both of those poles. It can be really fun to play with that. I'm not going to say everybody's switchy because that's like saying a bisexual saying everybody is bisexual. We know that that's not true. But if that rings true to you, I want you just to feel into that. Like, do you sometimes like to lead and sometimes like to follow? Do you sometimes like to top and sometimes like to bottom? Great, you might be switchy.
Or do you
Again,
rather
on a
side?
spectrum. Or would you rather side? Yeah, which is a different thing. So, just in this moment, as we've kind of introduced some of this terminology and introduced some of this framework, I want you to ask yourself, just think for a moment, where in your life are you already living with a very clear dance with polarity? Maybe it's you have a boss who tells you what to do and when to do it. Maybe you are the boss. Maybe you're a parent and you're the one who is absolutely in charge of shit all the time because you have a small human that you're trying to raise and take care of. Maybe you're in an established DS dynamic with a partner or a lover. And just notice where it may be in the bedroom, may not be in the bedroom. It may be other ways that we play with polarity because there is this kind of magnetism to it that works for a lot of people. So if you feel like dropping into the chat, I would love to hear it. And if not, you can keep that to yourself. I think for me, one of the ways that, so again, as identifying as a switch is really great, feels really fun, makes my sexuality feel very expansive. When I'm teaching, especially in person, I am very much in that kind of directive, leading, top energy. And sometimes we have sex like that too, where I'm the top, I am the directive, and he's my very good bottom, or he's very sweet, submissive, right? And sometimes it's the opposite. And sometimes polarity is necessary, right? Like if you're the boss, like you have to kind of step into that role. And sometimes it's something we can put on, again, like a role, something we play with, things like that. All right. Please feel
Andrea, may
free
I add
to,
something here?
yeah, of course.
Okay, so I will bring a trauma-informed lens to this in part, and I'm going to share my personal story. So I'm a sexual abuse survivor, and so I will effort, at least through sharing my story, to bring some trauma-informed perspective to this. And it's not just being a survivor myself that gives me that perspective. I'm also trained in this stuff, right? No coincidence. I probably figured out, that I needed that healing myself, so I became a healer, right? This is the whole wounded healer archetype. So when Andrea talks about me personally being switchy, right? Because I'm switchy too. We were talking about this yesterday, and I said, I never want to play from my bottom place. I never want to play from my submissive place. I just go there. Right. So that is a trauma response and an adaptation that I learned that now I can hold as an adult who has survived and is on the other side and in a safe place, in a safe relationship. Now, I often want to be in charge and I want to play from that place. One, because it's fun, but why is it fun? Might it be fun in part because I was in situations which I had no control? Absolutely. So, this is not to say that all kinks are trauma based. They're not. But some kinks are trauma based, right? And I'm in a sample size of one and an example in that. And so, if you have any questions about the trauma perspective or the trauma experience that you might be having as we talk about this stuff, you can shoot me a private message in the chat. You can put it in the chat if you want it to be more public, whatever works for you. But I'm watching the chat. And if any of this brings up anything that's hard for you, please take care of yourselves. If you need to step away, if you need to go breathe, if you need to feel your butt wherever it is, mine's in a chair, right? Just remember, this is a safe place here with us. And you can take care of yourself. You have agency. So if anybody needs to take a break from this, please, you have that permission.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So again, as we think about all these multiple ways to play with polarity, I want to offer you some examples, right? And I did already, like if you're a parent, you're in the directive role necessarily, right? We do not want 5-year-olds telling us how to run our lives. And in particular, in this society, it's usually mothers who are the primary parent and who carry the bulk of what we call the mental load, which is to say, all the planning, all the project management, all the ideas, all the appointments, all the everything. And at the end of the day, that person who is directive all day, caring, leading, project managing, may want to slip into a different perspective at night, right? And I've heard from lots of women in heterosexual partnerships who say, I just want my husband, I just want my partner to dominate me. Like, well, great. Like, what does that mean? Do you want them to be your daddy in that energetic space and you're the baby who's taken care of? Do you want them to be physically dominant and throw you up against the wall and take you and ravish you? Ravishment's a very popular fantasy. Or do you want something else? And if you want something else, and this is kind of for everybody, not just parents, what needs to change in you to make space for that, right? Like if you are leading all day, you are running a business, running a household, running your own life, what needs to shift in you in order to change your felt state of being, right? So the example that Christopher just gave, I literally didn't know what he was talking about because like he said, I'm in this kind of like directive mode and I can't very easily switch from being directive, being leading, being in this kind of teaching space to being like, oh yeah, like that was really hot and I felt really surrendered in that a few moments ago. Like it literally did not compute. Those of you that have been on workshops with me, like it takes a lot to fluster me, and and he did because it's like a different part of me. And so as he says, he is very easy to slip into this submissive space, into what we might call subspace, right? Submissive space. It's like an altered state of consciousness, and it is very, very, very difficult for me to do so. One of the things I hear a lot from my clients, my students, all these people, most of us, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, have a very hard time receiving. How many of you, we're all very good at giving. We're all like, I'm a great giver. I love giving blowjobs. I love going down on my partner. I love, doing the doing, right? And that's great. Like, may we all be good giving and gain, according to Dan Savage, right? May we want to pleasure our partners. Absolutely. I'm here for that. But that opposing energy may be something that's missing from your dynamic, right? And so I want you to imagine that you were getting a massage. Maybe you've had a massage recently or body work or something like that. And are you able to really receive that in your body? And by receive, I mean fully relaxed, asking for what you want, requesting calibration, too fast, too slow, no, not there, more here? Or are you on the massage table, stiff as a board, like trying to relax, trying to relax, trying to relax, and the massage person is doing whatever they're doing with no communication, no check in, and you're like racing yourself through it? Because a lot of people do massage like that. A lot of people receive sex like that. Like, well, they want to do this, and therefore I should just kind of muscle my way through it. And I think when we start to understand that there are these things that need to shift in a sexual dynamic, in a massage dynamic, then we can start to know that, like, yes, the other person needs to show up in a different way, but I need to show up in a different way too, right? And this could be, if we take it out of the sexual context, it could be just a conversation. Are you able to sit and listen and hold space? Like be present, be coherent, be holding while the other person is talking, right? That's its own kind of dance of polarity. Or are you always wanting to talk? Are you always wanting to be the leader of the conversation? Do you always have something to say? Where can you sit back and kind of be in that dance, right? Um, Christopher, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. So one of the, as Andrea is describing this, one of the things we're assuming is safety in your current relationship.
Hmm.
So if you don't have that, and I know not everyone does, sometimes getting through sex is what we call survivor sex, right? And so sometimes if you just have to get through a partnered experience because the person you're with isn't safe enough to slow down and have these conversations, you're not doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. So
Yes.
from here, we're going to assume safety, but please know that that assumption is often hard fought and hard won. So we see you.
And I am going to drop something into the chat in just a moment. So, Christopher, I'm going to put you on the spot again. Um,
Ready?
because last month we did our multiple orgasms class. And what we talked about, again, from this trauma informed, kind of multi-dimensional lens, is not just do this thing, check this box, try this toy, try this position, put the thing in the other thing in this way. It's actually like we spent a whole half an hour talking about safety, down regulation, how do we co-regulate with our person so that we feel safe enough to ask for what we want, that we feel safe enough to surrender, that we feel safe enough to let ourselves go? Because that's kind of the other part of this is like when we can really surrender, when we can really relax, that opens up space for more orgasmic possibilities. So Christopher, do you have anything you want to say about that so I can look up the link?
So the thing I will say about this is a dialectic. So if you work with me, you'll learn that I work in dialectics where two opposing things can be true and multiple opposing things can be true at the same time. So one of the things that we're bumping up against here in long-term relationship, be they open or closed relationships, is that there are two things that we know. That long-term consistency and the ability of a person to receive and to hear and to hold their separateness from the other, that builds safety that from which we can then go into new erotic spaces and explore. That's true. Here's the other truth, that long-term relationships, they extinguish novelty, and novelty is one of the biggest sexual fuels. So the very thing that can provide us safety can also dim the erotic fire or the erotic energy. So then how do you work with both? Right. And so I just want to put that out there that both things are true at the same time. I need this safety and consistency so I can, be the bottom who is, formed in the crucible of trauma. But then I need novelty to get into that part of me that wants to take, to quote the Wheel of Consent, the take allow spectrum. So again, there's a paradox there that we have to hold and we have to manage. So that's just something that doesn't mean anything's broken. That's just a problem with which we have to grapple.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So, if you're interested in talking about multiple orgasmic possibilities, but also the nervous system regulation and the safety that's deeply woven into that. I dropped the link to our last workshop. It's on my Patreon. It's free. Some great comments I want to read. So one of them says, speaking up is my current edge for sure. Yes, totally
Nice.
feel that. Even internally, even as simply as letting myself acknowledge my wants and my right to ask for them. This is so excellent. Thank you for sharing this because speaking up is really hard. Like I mentioned, a lot of my people have a really hard time receiving. And there's lots of reasons for that. And it's hard to speak up for what we want because we have been told not to be selfish, not to be needy, not to be greedy, right? Not to be too bossy. And there's this interesting dialectic where we're supposed to know everything that we want, and our partner is just supposed to magically show up and deliver it, right? And that, even if it's not conscious, is often happening. It is amazing to me still working with adults in this space how many people expect our partners to be mind readers. They should just know. They should just know I want to be thrown up against a wall. Absolutely not. Nobody ever knows what's going on inside your brain. And so learning how to speak about what we want is very, very vital. And for the person who wrote that, the Wheel of Consent is very, very good for this because and I see the comment before that, which is learning to use our voice, but it's made me a better receiver by asking for what I want. Practicing asking for what you want is so, so powerful. And I have led multiple groups of women in this particular example to just sit down in front of someone and tell them the things that you want. And you would not believe how hard it is for people to say the things that they want, even if it's really simple. Like, I really need to get a manicure. I really need to go buy this thing for my house, or I really would need a vacation, or I need to finish this project today. Like, whatever it is, like saying what you want for you is somehow still encoded in our system as like selfish or needy or greedy. And those are pretty negative things to feel. But one of the nice reframes I like for this is learning to ask for what we want is giving our partner or ourselves the opportunity to please us, right? If I don't tell Christopher what I like and what I want, then he is going to be swimming in the dark, like not sure, and be constantly second guessing or wondering, or like, is this okay? But if I can give him a clear path, I want to do this and I want to do it for this long, and here's how I want to feel, then he has a chance to really step in and do that exact thing. And so one of our teachers talked about if you struggle with asking for what you want, which, again, a lot of people do, is take yourself to get a massage or some sort of body work and try and make it as bossy as possible. Or maybe do it with a friend who you have a nice intimate relationship with and be really bossy, like exaggerate this part of you because it'll give you a chance to feel stepping into that. And I have really tried to do this over the years in my bodywork sessions. And not all massage therapists are able to meet you there. Like I have been very clear with massage therapists and they kind of just can't do it, right? So not everybody's going to be able to do it, but the practice starts with you. Here's what I want. Here's how I want you to do it. That's too hard. More here, less here, etc. And thinking about it also as calibration is really helpful, right? Maybe somebody is doing something to you that you really like. What would make it 5% more comfortable or 5% more sexy or 5% more delicious? I love what you're doing, but can you slow it down a little bit? That might really change things. And I notice in my body that if we're fooling around and I'm starting to feel turned on, oftentimes that's what I need. I need him to slow down so that I can relax more into the pleasure. And as soon as I say it, because I have this like ping of intuition, like this is what I want, but sometimes I wait a little bit. I don't know why, because I get stuck, because I feel nervous. But when I say it out loud, it's like this immediate wash of relief and relaxation. So not only when you speak what you want, you not only give your partner the chance to meet you there, you also give yourself the felt sense of like, this is okay to ask, right? This is okay to say what I want. Um, okay. Speaking up causes me anxiety. Christopher, you want to take that one? What does that mean?
Do
How does that work
there,
if speaking up causes anxiety?
there's another great dialectic further up in the chat. So, Andrea, I'll give you some time to check that one out. So, I really relate to the idea that, hey, I used alcohol or drugs to alleviate my anxiety to allow me to speak up. So, I come from the deep south of the United States, Louisiana specifically, where alcohol abuse was cultural politeness. I literally was trained at an early age to make people's drinks. I knew the adults that came to my house, I knew their drinks, and I knew to make them one when they got there. And I knew to give them one in a go cup as they left. A go cup, y'all. This is what Southwest Louisiana was like, and still is. Okay, so alcohol abuse and sex for me are intertwined, and disentangling those has been a real chore. It has been a real chore because in the same way, I have social anxiety, fear of judgment, fear I'm doing it wrong, fear of it, I used to meet criteria for generalized anxiety disorder plus a bunch of other stuff. The insidious part of alcohol and other drugs is they work. Right? Like if I don't like the way I'm feeling, a shot and a beer is going to fix it. I mean, it's going to change it. It did for me anyway, become its own problem down the road. But yeah, I think just that awareness that, oh, this is scary. Okay, so then when we feel, so y'all, just to clue you in, your emotions are your sixth sense. So when I'm feeling anxious, am I scared? Ask yourself this. Am I scared of something that happened before? Trauma informed, right? So if sex was forced on me, that was a really scary situation. I don't live there anymore, but my brain sometimes doesn't know that. So then, okay, am I feeling anxious because of something that's a real threat in the moment? Am I feeling anxious because this was once scary in the past? Or am I afraid that if I really ask for what I want, not only will I be appalled by it, but my partner's going to reject me? So there's a future oriented. So anxiety in and of itself, if you can sit with it and slow down and be curious, is telling us something. And it's telling us one of those three things. Either I'm having a trauma response and my brain is time traveling, or I'm having an experience that's legitimately scary in this moment and the anxiety is trying to protect me, or I'm worried about something that if I really do this, I'm worried about some future outcome, right? So slowing down and trying to find that answer is a start. But boy, you talk about stuff that's not super sexy. Whoa, I'm in the moment. I'm having this anxiety. Hey, babe, let me slow down and deal with this panic attack I'm on the verge of. This is where safety and communication is really important. So the global advice I would have if you're in a partnered sexual situation or relationship is that when the sexual iron is cool, meaning not in scene or not in bed when you're about to have sex, but you're having coffee over, I don't know, a breakfast table or something like that. let's bring this up in a non-sexual scenario, going, hey, this is something I realized about myself. I'm kind of new in my sobriety, perhaps, and I'm discovering that I really have a hard time speaking up and I'm anxious. And without the alcohol to take care of that feeling, this is hard for me. So, the next couple of times, can we have sex? Can I workshop that with you? Is that okay? And if the answer is no, then we got to really respect the no, right? So, Andrea talked about just a minute ago an example of slowing down. She may ask me sometimes if I can slow down, and I may be available for that, and I may not. And so then I have to be able to have enough of a pause to give her that feedback, right? I mean, so this is where just because a partner asks us for something doesn't mean we have to do it, but it does mean we have to honor it. Okay, so in a scenario where Andrea really wants to slow down and I say, I don't know if I can. I mean, this may be a timeout situation. We call it off ramps. Like if this isn't a good off ramp for me, or, a school zone where I slow down, right? Then I have to communicate that to her. And then we have a dilemma we have to, we have a problem we have to solve, right? Or manage right there in the moment. So when we talk about, these partnered sexual experiences, this is sometimes why I tell my folks, if you're not good at two, be careful before you try three. If you're not good at three, be careful before you try four. Because, I mean, there's a lot happening dynamically in these moments. And to be able to hold all that and stay attached to your desire, y'all, this is a good time to say sex is art. And not every
Hmm.
sexual experience is going to be a masterpiece, and that's okay, right? Because there's a lot going on here and we need to practice. We need to practice
Hmm.
these things in a safe environment.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into one of the questions in the chat, which is I've spent a career being a directive. For some reason in the bedroom where I am most safe, I struggle to be that way, which is something my spouse needs. And then they followed it up, and because Christopher had answered, structured scenes might help, which we'll talk about in a second. Um, that's something to consider. I think if I could learn some of the language or techniques, I would be more comfortable. I so yes, I want to talk about structured scenes, and the language is important, but also I think it is more important to feel it, right? And understanding both what the felt sense is that you desire, whether that's something, I crave feeling totally surrendered, or I crave being in full control of my partner, or I want to see their surrender, right? Staying with that feeling, like that is the North Star, right? What is the scene or the sensation that I want to create for this person? That I think is more important than the language. The language can be helpful, especially when the iron is not hot, right? Like Christopher's saying, like when we have these conversations, for sure. And hopefully this workshop is giving you some of that language to play with. And when we talk about structured scenes, this is something else that we've borrowed from the BDSM community, is really thinking about like, and this all kind of ties in together, right? What we want in the sheets is maybe what we protest in the streets, or what we do all day is not necessarily what we need in the bedroom at night, right? And that's where scenes come in handy. And by scenes, you could also call it workshop sex, which is what Christopher was just mentioning, is I want to try this new thing, or I want to step into this role, or I want you to experience this thing. And we're going to do this for 20 minutes. This is not how we're going to live our life. This is not going to change our relationship. This is not what we're going to have to do forever and ever. We're never going to have sex any other way. It's what are we going to do for the next 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe a full hour if you're feeling very brave. And when we talk about setting the scene, if any of you come from a theater background, you know, and I think about this as teaching, right? Like when I teach, like I kind of step into a role. Like, yes, this is really me and this is really who I am, but it's like an outfit that I wear, right? It's kind of, I don't say it's a persona, but it's kind of a persona. It's like I step into this,
Absolutely.
right? I was so bitchy and grumpy and hobgoblin over the past couple of days. Like I have been fucking miserable sitting here at my desk, and now I feel enlivened, in charge, bright, chatty. It's totally different, right? Like I have stepped into this role. And sometimes that is what's called for in a scene or in a workshop. So sometimes that can be explicit, right? I want to try this thing. I want to step more into my directive, dominant top energy, what would feel like a good amount of time to play with this, right? And you set the scene. So, in order to do this, here's what I'm going to embody. Here's my intention. And then your partner gets to say, okay, well, here's how I'm going to show up, right? And one of the things that can happen, especially when we're talking about directive and receptive, is the person who's directing may really want to step into that. And like I mentioned earlier, we all have a hard time receiving. So the person who wants to be receiving might be like, yeah, but you're doing it wrong. Or yeah, but not like that. Or yeah, but I have to shift, right? And that may totally ruffle the dominant or the directive in that scene. But understanding that you both are stepping into this role, again, even if it's only for 15 minutes, gives you a chance to play with it and kind of taste it. Um, we've had some experiences where, again, like he doesn't necessarily ask for to be the submissive. Sometimes it's just what feels right in the moment because I'm deeply attuned to his energy and I can flow with him kind of where he's at. And if I get a certain sense from him that he's in this receptive state kind of naturally, then there's a way we can play with that. But for me, it has to be a little bit more structured. And we are actually, this has been a kind of an ongoing struggle with us is like, how does the ambitious entrepreneur educator learn to surrender? So this is very active in our own relationship too. So, yes.
So, two things. One, on language. I think knowing that frameworks exist for this is super, super helpful. So the framework I like best, Andrea's talking about directive, receptive. I like DS, dominance and submission, right? So part of this is knowing the frameworks that exist, but then understanding how do we use a version of it, one that's right for me, that feels what we would call in psychodynamic psychotherapy egosyntonic, meaning that it's a piano concerto with all the right notes. Ah, this language feels right to me. Now, does that language feel right to my partner? Okay, now we got to do a little bit of negotiating. So when Andrea says she's finally attuned to me and she can kind of read me to see if my submissive is forward or if my dom is forward, she's right. The first time this happened, though, her response was, in a very sweet way, I'm not trained to handle this, right? So when she tells you, "Oh, I'm attuned and I can do this," y'all, we have explicitly been working on this for over 4 years. So that's what I mean. I mean, what she's giving you kind of that expert level. Oh, I can read him and be attuned to him. But we have actually talked about DS since we started seeing each other. So, again, this is going to be a practice. I used earlier off ramps and on ramps. There's not a book on that because it's a parlance, a shorthand that she and I have developed that have meaning to us. So yes, finding the language that exists has been very helpful for me of going, oh God, I'm not the only person in the world who wants to be dominant. Right. And then I've read a bunch of books on domination because that's actually what I think I want when I'm actually also a switch who, sometimes my energy shows up as a bottom. Right. So that's an acceptance piece. Right. Because I don't really want that part of me, but it's part of me. Right. So here's the self compassion work in self. Right. So it was very helpful for me to learn all this dominant language. But I'll tell you a typical dominant phrase, a stereotypic one that does not work for me. Now, just because it doesn't work for me, please don't think of me as the sex therapist in this moment who's some authority figure, because the words I'm about to say may really feel good to you. Remember, sometimes we want in the sheets what we protest in the streets. One of the stereotypic Dom phrases that you'll see if you start to investigate this world a little bit is kneel, bitch. Some people really want that. The Nicole Kidman kind of mainstream movie that came out, Baby Girl, kind of does a good job of showing somebody for whom humiliation is part of her submission, that character that she plays, right? But for me, I have no desire to humiliate, and I have absolutely no desire to be humiliated. So the kind of neo bitch, typical stereotypic Dom isn't a great fit for me. So I had to go looking. What is there a Dom? I would ask myself, is there a Dom, language that works for me? Well, there's Dom language out there called a service Dom. Oh, now we can play because I really want to serve Andrea and I want to serve past partners. Right now, I want to serve them in part because it turns me on. And that's a nuance I wanted to bring in. Who is this DS play for? Right? And so in the question in the chat was, hey, I'm in a dominant directive job all day long. Sometimes I want to be submissive, but my partner really needs me to stay in that dom energy. Okay, so this is where that DS play or that energetic play that we're talking about can really be structured. And what I would suggest is that you consider thinking about your DS play like you might think of orgasm. So we have gotten pretty well accustomed to thinking it's probably not likely that in partnered sex we're going to orgasm simultaneously, even though that's the fantasy that a lot of us were pitched. Right. So we gotten used to she comes first and then she comes second, or he comes first and then he comes second. We do it in sequence. You can play with these energetics and these roles the same way. Like Andrea said, hey, 20 minutes where I'm doming you, then 20 minutes where you're doming me, if that's what I need. And then you negotiate that when the sexual iron is cool, right? And there's your scene.
And that's a great lead in. I got an anonymous question that I want to speak to because I imagine a lot of other people have this question too. Because we've talked about the energies, we've talked about kind of how to put it into action, kind of how to feel into it. And this person asks, I'm curious how asking for what we want applies when what I want involves a power dynamic. And I'm finding it hard to voice that with a new partner in a polyam context. How do we ask for things that feel vulnerable or that the other person might be hesitant about? So I think this question is really interesting in a lot of ways. So, one, really, I think the first part is really knowing what you want, right? And that is a process of sitting with yourself and really doing kind of an inventory. And I have some workbooks and worksheets that I sell that are, your sexual values and your sexual interests and your yes no maybe list and things like that, which are, what do I want? I want to feel like this. I want to feel like that. I want to try this position. I want to get finger banged. I want to have group sex. I want to be domed, whatever it is. And then there's also, how do I want to feel, right? I want to feel surrendered. I want to feel tiny. I want to feel taken care of. I want to feel in charge. I want to feel dominant. I want to feel like I'm in service of somebody, right? So there's the physical activities. What do I want? There's the felt sense of what do I really want? And then when we combine those, then there's a little bit of inventory around like, am I okay with that? Right. And that's kind of the shame and the story part that Christopher's talking about, right? Like he really wants, very logically, cognitively, wants to be more of a pleasure dom or a service dom. And actually, he's quite a very good bottom, right? And so he's both, and I am both, and I have a harder time accessing that, right? So what do I need to surrender? So part of it is getting very clear with yourself. And one of the ways you can do this is by asking yourself, what do you fantasize about? Do you watch pornography that includes a certain type of scene? Do you read erotica or listen to erotica that has a certain type of scene? Is it the boss and the secretary? Is it the doctor and the patient? Is it the daddy and the baby who takes care of you? There's so many different ways to play with it. So think about what you already like, and then maybe ask yourself, like, is this actually what I want in real life with a relationship? Or again, back to this idea of what do I want in scene. As far as bringing that to a partner, it's going to be more helpful if you can be very clear. I want to do this thing. I want to feel this way. Here's the power dynamic I would like to cultivate with you. And what I think is interesting about this question is that this person is saying, but the other person might be hesitant about that. And this is where we're doing a little bit of mind reading on our own, right? Because we don't know. They might not have done the interrogation to know what they really want. And so this is a chance for them, like you're inviting them in, right? This is not a demand. We don't demand things of our partner. We invite them. Hey, I've been thinking that I would really like to explore pegging. This is something that I've read about, I've listened to, I've watched a bunch of porn about it. It's super sexy for me. Here's how I would like to do it. Are you open to that? Are you interested in trying that? This could be really fun for me. Would you be willing to join me? Right? And that could be anything. That could be a power dynamic. That could be a doctor patient scene. It could be pegging. It could be fill in the blank for your desires. But being clear about what you want, bringing that clearly and honestly and vulnerably, like it's not easy to a person, especially a new person, and being really honest and giving them a chance to feel into it. And this person is particularly asking about a new partnership, but I actually think it's the same in an existing partnership and in a long term partnership, right? Sometimes we get stuck in roles in our partnerships that are no longer serving us. If we've been together for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, the sex that we were having 20 years ago may not be the sex we need or want to be having now. So, coming to your long term partner with asking for something different or for something to shift or to play a different way is just as vulnerable, even if it does feel very safe. There are still, I would still advise that kind of rigorous self inquiry and then that gentle invitation to your partner to join you. If your partner's on board, amazing. I can't wait to do this. How do we set up a scene? Let's talk about it over breakfast tomorrow and schedule it for next week, Friday, whatever. If they are not on board, then what? Then we give them, that's an aspect of differentiation, right? I like this thing. My partner doesn't like it. Hmm. Can I live without that thing? Maybe. Can I explore that in my fantasies? Can I keep it in my erotica, in my porn, in my fantasies while I masturbate? Or is it something that actually I really need this? This is something I absolutely have to have. And therefore, this partner may not be the right person for you. Or maybe you find another person who can meet that, right? And that's where non monogamy, I think, is a great experience for a lot of people because we can't get everything we need from one person. Maybe you need to have a a master slave dynamic with another person, but that's not your long term partner. But that's a part of your sexuality that you want to express. Christopher, anything you want to add? You were dancing around, so I'm not sure if that
I
was a
have
question or if you were
ideas.
just celebrating.
I have a suggestion. So
Okay,
I
great.
am a big fan of the structured conversation. Something that we where we talk about this and we talk about it consistently, regularly. We also don't talk it to death, right? So the structured conversation would be like, hey, we're gonna do 15 minutes worth of talk about our sex life once a week, right? And we're gonna do it in again a non, sexual situation. Just a story from the consultation room. What is therapy in a couple context or a relationship context that's not a facilitated conversation, a structured conversation? If you think about it, right? If you commit to relationship therapy, then I'm committing to go somewhere, put away the phones, put away other priorities, calendar it, schedule it, pay for it, right? So we're going to prioritize this structured conversation. I had a very similar conversation on this topic not too long ago, but this happened over several sessions where it was like, I need to be submissive. I need to be with a partner who's dominant. I'm not sure my partner can dominate me, right? So, like Andrea said, I have an idea. I'll go find this need of mine met somewhere else. Okay. So then what comes up, would come up for any of us if we had been in a, say, a closed dynamic is a fear of abandonment. One, because we were all once upon a time children that if we were literally abandoned, we would die. Right? I mean, so fear of abandonment is hardwired into us, right? So that was the first hurdle. The second hurdle, which again happened in a follow-up structured conversation, is the actual present fear for this adult in my office was less abandonment and more a fear of failure. So then it had to be a discussion about why my partner wasn't into this because they had no interest in doming and didn't know the language, didn't know the skills, didn't know how to do it, and they have an intense fear of failure. Right? So, but we didn't get to that in the first structured conversation. Right. So that's just, a plug for the structured conversation about this stuff, because what you may uncover is what's hitting the brakes on that particular scene for a person may not be exactly what you think. May not be exactly what you think. And it may not be a hard edge no. It just has to be held in a context where, oh, it's okay if I'm not good at this when we start? Yeah, it's okay. You mean I can get better at this over time? Uh-huh. Oh, well, then that might be fun, which is actually what happened. Yay. But there's a plug for the structured conversation about this stuff, right? And if you don't get it all, kind of fleshed out in the first one, you're doing it right.
I think that's also a nice kind of segue into the identity versus behavior, right? And I think especially when we lean more into the BDSM terms like dominant, submissive, things like that, like you don't have to be a dominant all the time. That doesn't have to be your identity. It can be something you step into, it can be that role. It can be something you play with when your partner is craving that, right? And that's where the scene or the workshop really comes in handy. And, Christopher, you said just a moment ago, like, I can get better at this over time. You know, kind of wired into us is that sex is natural and therefore it should be easy. And a lot of us have this like, well, it should be easier. I should just know. Like, I'm not going to plunk you down in Portugal and just expect you to know Portuguese language. Like, you have to learn it. Just like if my partner suddenly says they want to explore, these different energies or they want to explore sex in a different way, like, I don't expect either of us to know it because it's like a different language. And so if you take that metaphor to work with your sex life, you know, that's a helpful metaphor, right? Because like, obviously we don't expect people to download languages like they did in the Matrix, right? Like it has to be practiced, and you have to practice it with other people, right? Like you can sit in front of a computer or in front of a book and learn whatever language, and it's wildly different when you're like actually in conversation with people at the market or at the shops or whatever, right? And if you've ever had to learn a second language, you know that the conversation and the play and the dynamic is actually where you do most of the learning. So there's this, part of it is giving ourselves permission to be not great at something, to know that, like, oh, I'm still learning. And again, baked into a lot of us is that sex is supposed to be easy. And so we have to really unwind that part of it and say, like, no, like, sex is natural. Yes, our bodies are wired for pleasure, but we're going to learn how to do stuff in a different way. And that's what's going to take time.
So to add my piece on behavior versus identity, and I'll use a personal example. So one of the things about identity is anything that is fundamental to who you are. Right. So this is, back before it was politicized when we asked people, how do you identify? Right. That could be a gender question. It could be a relational structure question, which is how I often intend it. Right. It could be sexual orientation. It could be political affiliation. It could be I mean, we all can identify. In other words, how do you think about yourself fundamentally as your core? Right. This is how I identify. So one of the identifications that I often say when people ask me that question is I am polyamorous because I have loved more than one person in my life, sometimes more than one at a time. And where I come from in the deep south, that means you're doing it wrong and you're sinning. So for my entire life, I have thought loving more than one person at a time was wrong. Therefore, I was wrong. So this idea of polyamorous as an identity was a huge relief to me. It's central channel true. It's my identity. Now, that's how I understand my heart. When Andrea and I contemplate playing sexually with a third or a third and a fourth, I don't crave that sexual expression as identity. Now, can I do the behavior? Yeah. Is it fun? Yeah. But is it a fundamental, is that particular sexual expression fundamental to who I am? No. Right? So there's an example of I can do the behavior, right? But it doesn't change who I am. This is oftentimes why you'll see people who can do the behavior, say, of same-sex attraction, but still identify as straight, right? There's a real difference there between how I feel about my self-identity and the behavior in which I can engage. So it's a huge relief sometimes when I have an identity dom or an identity sub and they're going, "Oh, my partner or one of my and none of my partners are identity the, counterbalance polar opposite." That doesn't mean you have to break up. That means that if the other can engage in the behavior and you can do it in scene, or maybe it just lives in fantasy. But anyway, there's a lot of flexibility here, and identity is not required. It's not required.
Also, I would say identity might not always be fixed, right? For some of us, it is, right? Like I've identified as bisexual since I was like fucking 12 and my Barbies were all kissing each other. And other people might not identify that way, or they might be bisexual and actually realize they're straight or that they're lesbian or whatever, right? So you may not identify as a dom or as a top or whatever, but over time you might become really competent at it and be like, actually, this is who I am, right? And so that to say, it may shift over time, right? We have another really juicy question. This was an anonymous one. So I have a fantasy that involves consensual non-consent or CNC, and I carry a lot of
Mm.
shame around it. My partner sees it as inhumane. How do I have that conversation with him? And how do I work through my shame about wanting it in the first place? So, Christopher, I would love to bounce it to you first because I think you're
Yeah.
kind of the expert on shame in this
Yeah.
dynamic duo.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, a few things. When Andrea, whoever you are, when Andrea was saying, I have a fantasy, my heart filled with helium, and I was like, hey, because our fantasies, and I may be the first person to tell you this, your fantasy is fun. Your fantasy is awesome. Your fantasy is beautiful. Okay. So remember, oftentimes what we want in the sheets is what we will protest in the streets. So it's possible that your partner said, "No, and I'm assuming it's a male-female dynamic. That's an
It's a
assumption
male
that
partner, yeah.
shows a little bit of my bias. So the partner may be going, "No, I want to be one of the good ones. I would never." Right? And so it's bringing up something for them. So that's a sign of poor differentiation, right? So again, your fantasy, it doesn't mean anything to your partner. It's yours. It's yours. It's yours. So you took a great first step, which is saying what you want out loud, especially saying something you're ashamed of out loud. So what we know, and this is credited to Brene Brown and her work on shame, shame dies in the light, it lives in the dark. Here's the problem with the scenario you mentioned. And it's also a problem that a lot of my fellow therapists who have not been trained as sex therapists do unintentionally to clients. So I've been through specific training, so has Andrea, so that when anybody comes in and they tell us what they're into, we don't go, because that reaction is shame generating, right? Because what you see in that second is exactly what you've been afraid of, right? Because I'll speak for me. I'm a shame-based human being at my core. I know what is in me is bad. And so inevitably, when it would come out, then I was around people who also agreed with me, and then I would get validated. Oh, I would get that yuck response. And then I'd go, oh, see, I was right. And I had a confirmation bias story that I was bad. So I had a story going in, and I was kind of looking for data to see, yeah, see, I'm bad, right? So the differentiation work is to get really clear that what in you it's not bad, it's good, it's fun, it's something we can play with. The fact that you're here shows me you're a fellow traveler with us, right? You're walking a road that is super cool, but it's also fraught with some landmines, right? And so, yeah, disentangling that shame, all roads in sex therapy, by the way, lead to shame. So, so getting clear that what is in you is good and beautiful and awesome. Now, then, how do I find expression in that? So that when a partner goes, that's immoral, you realize, oh, that's their baggage. That's
Mm-hmm.
not my baggage. That's their baggage, right? But in the moment when we're sort of, really using that person as a mirror to test out, is what in me really bad? Because I think it is anyway. And yep, you gave me that response, so I already knew it. And now I'm going to hide it even further and longer, right? That's shame generating. It's going to live in the dark. So that is the very long-winded answer. One, you got to get really cool with what's in you, and that may take some time. Maybe this is all you needed, is just the permission. If so, run with it. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it might. And either way, you're not doing it wrong. And then understand that their response is mostly about them, not about you, right? Then we kind of take it from there, right? Can they hold enough space to get right with themselves and whatever baggage they just unpacked on you, right? And so sometimes, and look, I mean, I'm with a partner now who can hold that space with me. I haven't always been, right? So there were partners in my history that were shame generators for me. The tough part about that for me is I had to leave those people. I had to get to a safe place so I could be all of me in myself and then bring all of me to someone else who would be careful with me, right? So that's a lot of answers. And so I don't know which one of those is an on-ramp for you. Again, sometimes all we need is the information that, and by the way, consent, non-consent, you're not alone. There's so many people who have that turn on, and it's awesome when you play with it with somebody who knows what they're doing and can set up that scene. Andrea and I were at a party one time. We're talking with this dude whose primary partner had that kink, and kink, by the way, is just sex in any way that you wouldn't tell your grandmother about with, comfort. His partner had a consent, non-consent kink and went on to show us this very careful scene that they had set up for them with three other people who did a kidnapping scenario, and surprise was a big part of it for the partner and how they did it. And it was fucking awesome. But it was not done spontaneously. This was done with a lot of scripting and a lot of table reads and a lot of rehearsal before opening night. And remember, opening night had to be a surprise to the partner, right? So there's an art to how do I script this but still have an element of surprise. It's totally doable. It's totally doable, by the way. And for those for whom it's hot, it is super hot. I have a little bit of that myself, by the way, right? I have asked.
No.
I have asked Andrea to, how would we have said in the 1950s, slip me a Mickey sometimes. And she goes, oh, I would never want that. But I've done enough work to know, well, her is about her. It's not about me. And so I kind of held space. She was able to work through that. And then one day she did it. And it was awesome. So again, you're not alone. You're not alone. That is the overarching thing I want you to know.
Yeah, and just to normalize, consensual non-consent is kind of the specific term from the vocabulary of kink, but some people might call it a ravishment fantasy
Hmm.
or a rape fantasy, right? Which
Hmm.
again, nobody is saying we're not condoning sexual violence and nobody really wants sexual violence, but in this structured way, what does it give us? It gives us a chance to feel surprised. It gives us a chance to feel wanted. It gives us a chance to feel like I'm so irresistible that this person can't keep their hands off me. Like those are very real, valid feelings and sensations. And so ravishment and like I listen to a bunch of romanticy shit, the dragon stuff, the fairy stuff, like all of that. A lot of it is based on like this ravishment fantasy. Like, I don't know what I want. Like, just take me. And there's a lot of unconsensual choking and all this stuff. Like, this is very popular and it is very common. So just to normalize that part of it, I think having the language around consent, non-consent is important. And just for the rest of the group, I referenced Alice Lovegood, who is this adorable British BDSM
Sure.
educator with cute pink hair and OnlyFans creator who loves consent, non-consent. And she does a bunch of scenes that are consent, non-consent. And she often shares bloopers when shit goes wrong. And she also shares these really intense scenes that are very, very impactful for her. And again, this is to normalize whatever it is that you want, as long as nobody's being harmed. That's always the caveat in this work. Um, but owning it for yourself and knowing that, like, when you let yourself feel that, that is going to be freeing. Whether or not this person is able to meet you there, that's the question, right? Because if he thinks it's quote unquote inhumane, that's his own stuff to work on. He may not be able to get there. I use this example a lot as a very non sexual example, but like I continue to try and offer Christopher kale, and he just doesn't like it. At some point, the problem is me, right? He is saying no. I have to honor his no.
That's
That,
not entirely true. To add a little nuance, like I'll eat the kale she serves me. I don't think she's making me do it. Like she will withhold love or affection for me or attention for me if I don't.
yeah,
But that's behavior, right? Like Andrea put kale in her bouquet. Like
that's my wedding bouquet.
kale is identity to her. So what she's doing is she's not requiring it to be identity to me.
Yeah,
Right? Would I choose kale on my own? No. But would I eat it if she offered it? Yeah, that's behavior.
yeah.
Right? But I don't identify as kale. She does.
Yeah. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a couple where one person hated the word dirty and the other partner really liked using it because it had a great connotation for him. And the work there is not to say her feelings are wrong for not liking that word or that his feelings are right for liking that word. It's to notice that they are two different people who have different needs about what they need to hear and talk about when it comes to sex,
That's
right?
differentiation, y'all.
That's
That's it.
differentiation in action, right? Like he gets to practice understanding. I think this word is hot. I think this word is powerful. This means a lot to me. I love having dirty sex. I love having a dirty wife, whatever it is. And that language does not work for her. So we figured out, great, what language works for her? And so then it's, her work to own that, like, hey, I don't like this. We need to find something different. And his work to say, you know what? I love her. This is how I'm going to meet her. Right. And that's another aspect of this, right? So whatever is coming up in you is your stuff. Whatever is coming up in your partner is their stuff. And it's holding both of those things are just as valid and just as true. So, as we think about polarity, there is an aspect of, your identity, right? I am this. And then there's the behavior part of it. I want this. I want to try this. Both of those are valid. That your partner is identity matched with you may not happen. That your partner can show up and enjoy the experience with you and be, as Dan Savage says, GGG, good, giving, and game. Great. Like, may we all be that for our partners, right? Unless there's harm, unless there's coercion, then that's a real hard no. But playing with our edges is really powerful here, right? I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure if I like this, but I'm willing to try. Like that's really where we start to get into the real juiciness of sexual play. So, as we close out, I want you to think about, you know, where in your life are you leading, doming, topping, whatever? And where in your life are you submissive, receptive, etc.? And if you can't think of any examples, I want you to start to practice. And if you have a partner, there are polarity practices that you can do. This is one of the things I offer my clients is how do we learn to dance with polarity in real time using like touch practices and conversation prompts and things like that. If you are solo or if you want to practice solo, you can still do this on your own. And you can practice really surrendering to your pleasure during a masturbation session. You can practice being with your body, doming yourself into like, you can take it, like, you can let go, you can feel more, you can take more. You can dom yourself in your self pleasure, or you can be more receptive in your self pleasure, right? You can also practice this in your yoga. How do I show up and just be receptive to what is? versus I want to show up and like get a good workout and really stretch and work on this part or try this handstand or whatever. You can practice this in your meditation. Can I be really surrendered to this moment? Or do I feel like I have to put some structure around it and kind of guide myself? So you can practice this too if you imagine, let's say you're going out to dinner by yourself and that feels a certain way. Maybe you feel a little shy doing that. What if you like stepped into this role of like, I fucking got this. Like, I am the dom of myself. I am the dom of this restaurant. I am the dom of this moment. And like walked into the restaurant like you fucking owned it. Like everyone there was your submissive. What if you walked in to a party knowing that everybody there is there to serve you? Right? And that's, you don't have to tell that to everyone, but it's an energy that you embrace. And so even if you're solo, I invite you to practice leaning one way or another and just to kind of play with that. And if you are in partnership, again, start to have some of these conversations, start to notice where you're trying to control, even though the other person is doming. Start to notice where you're acquiescing instead of surrendering. Start to notice where you're withholding, asking for what you really want. Start to notice these things about you without making them wrong. Again, like we are all in this learning space. So how can I notice, oh, I'm being a little, too directive right now when I really want to be more surrendered? Well, great. How do we slow it down? How do we surrender? Come back to our body, come back to our breath. You can ask your partner, hey, can you bring me back? How do we do that? One of the quickest ways that Christopher and I can get back into polarity if we slip out of it is through breath. He guides my breath and I follow him. And then we're in this dance together that completely shifts our dynamic. So it doesn't have to be a big thing and a big scene. It could also be very simple, small breath, cues, embodiment practices that you embrace in yourself to more fully be with what is or what you want to be in the moment. Anything you want to add to that, my darling?
I think you nailed it. I can't imagine anything I would say would make it better.
Okay, well, thank you. So I'd love to close out our recording right now.